Ah, Vampire Survivors, the plucky indie game that took gaming by storm in the year 2022. Currently sitting at 98% positive ratings on Steam, and costing less than a fancy cup of coffee, it's really no wonder that people picked it up and poured hours and hours into it. For anyone who doesn't know what Vampire Survivors is, and if you don't, I'm not really sure why you clicked on this video, but thank you very much. It's a roguelite reverse bullet hell that's designed to be played in short bursts. Players choose 6 weapons and 6 passive upgrades by leveling up their character, and do their best to survive to the end of the 30-minute stage. As this was really the game that kickstarted the incredibly well-titled Vampire Survivors likes genre, plenty of people have done everything there is to do by now in it. Yes, there was an excellent first DLC released at the end of 2022, but if you've had enough of this particular game and want something different, but not too different, well then, you've clicked on the right video. I'm John, and these are 7 of the best games like Vampire Survivors. 20 minutes till dawn. Obviously, all the games on this list do something different to Vampire Survivors, although to what extent varies from game to game. One of the biggest differences in this game is right there in the title. While in Vampire Survivors, the goal is usually to survive on a map for 30 minutes, in 20 minutes till dawn you have to survive for 10 minutes less, although that doesn't make it any easier. Players are tasked with surviving for 20 minutes while surrounded by Lovecraftian monsters in a spooky dark map. Another key difference in this game is that there are several different guns players can choose from when beginning a run. These range from a pistol with long range but a low rate of fire, to a shotgun which is perfect for close range fights, to even crossbows. Every character is compatible with every weapon, so it's up to the player to determine the best combination for their own playstyle. Similar to Vampire Survivors, players need to collect experience points that are dropped from monsters in order to level up. When they do level up, they have the choice of several different upgrades. Each upgrade has their own 4-part upgrade tree, so players will have to choose whether they want to spec into lots of different upgrade paths, or max out an upgrade before moving on. At the time of writing this video, 20 Minutes Till Dawn is still in early access on Steam, but it does already have a good amount of content. While there are only 3 maps currently, and the one song in the soundtrack does get very repetitive, the large roster of characters and weapons does provide a huge amount of replayability. Character selection has a much larger impact in this game as well, as some of their unique bonuses can make or break a run. Boneraiser Minions. Have you ever found yourself playing Vampire Survivors but getting overwhelmed by the gorgeous HD graphics? Then have I got the game for you. Boneraiser Minions takes the spooky aesthetic of Vampire Survivors but drops it down to a cool 8-bit art style. Boneraiser Minions is a lot more passive than Vampire Survivors. Instead of the player character attacking the ever-increasing waves of enemies, they're instead able to raise various skeletal minions that attack the enemies on their own. The player must carefully make their way around the small map, dodging enemies and collecting bones in order to raise even more minions. When they've collected enough bones, they'll be given a choice of raising a brand new minion or upgrading one of their existing ones. It's a tricky balance to strike between wanting more and more minions and making the current ones more powerful. Similar to Vampire Survivors, waves of enemies come in minute increments, with the first mini-boss showing up at the 3-minute mark. The mini-boss changes the game from just dodging enemies to pure bullet hell. When the player dies, and trust me, he'll die a lot, they can take their hard-earned gold back to the mausoleum and buy various upgrades, such as starting each run with extra minions, or even unlocking the ability to dodge. There are also a ton of characters to unlock, so players can easily pour hours into this game. At the time of writing, and you might notice a bit of a recurring theme here, Boneraiser Minions is still in early access on Steam. There's already a load of content in the game though, and players can spend many hours trying to unlock all characters and upgrades. Soulstone Survivors. The next game on our list is another one that does something quite different to Vampire Survivors. While in Vampire Survivors, the player often feels weak and fragile for a good portion of their runtime, Soulstone Survivors does a great job at making the player feel incredibly powerful. Runs will start very slowly, with the player having to carefully make every hit count and making sure they pick up every scrap of experience. Once they reach closer to the 10-minute mark though, they'll be zooming around the arena, watching waves of enemies crumble at their feet. Soulstone Survivors has a plethora of interesting characters to choose from, with each one having access to specific skill types upon leveling up. When the player levels up, they'll be offered either an active skill or a passive skill. The active skills are a bit like the weapons in Vampire Survivors, and the player is limited to holding 6 at a time, although they can choose to discard an old skill for a new one. The challenge of leveling up revolves around creating a build with the most amount of synergies as possible, such as ensuring all skills picked deal arcane damage, for example. A major difference in Soulstone Survivors is that your time on each map isn't limited. Players need to defeat 5 Lords of the Void as quickly as possible in order to clear a map. Once cleared, players are given the choice of ending the run or heading into either Endless or Overload mode. As the name implies, Endless mode runs can last a long time, so runs can take considerably longer than a typical game in Vampire Survivors. At the time of writing, Soulstone Survivors is also still in early access on Steam, but there's already a ton of replayability given the sheer number of builds available. It also has more achievements than Vampire Survivors, if that sort of thing floats your boat, so there's hours of potential playtime in this game. Nomad Survival. Of all the games on this list, this is the one that probably does the least different to Vampire Survivors. Players have to survive for 30 minutes, strong enemies drop chests that provide powerful upgrades, and different colored experience gems provide different amounts of experience. Nomad Survival does of course have its own unique features, however. At specific intervals in the 30-minute time limit, strong boss monsters will appear. There are also timed events, such as the map being plunged into darkness for several minutes. This event is particularly striking, as the various magical effects act as a source of light, so players are able to light up the darkness around them depending on their build. A big feature of Nomad Survival is the sheer number of rerolls players are given. It's not unusual to have close to 30 to 40 reroll chances around level 30, so players can really tailor their build exactly how they want. Instead of having to rely on chance to be offered the upgrade they're looking for, they can instead re-roll their offered skills until they see the one they really want. There aren't a ton of skills in the game, but they can often interact in interesting ways with each other, so build variety can really be all over the place. Nomad Survival is one of the few games in this genre that has actually completed early access on Steam. The developer, The Fox Knox, steadily made improvements and changes to the game until it was in a great state, then released it fully. It hasn't received any updates since it launched in October of 2022, so this is one of very few Vampire Survivors likes that are actually in a fully completed state. Roguegenesia. The next game on our list essentially combines the gameplay of Vampire Survivors with the progression of Slay the Spire. Players take control of the only character in the game, a knight called Rogue, and are given the choice between Rogue mode and Survivors mode. Survivors mode functions exactly like Vampire Survivors, where the player has to collect experience, level up their character, and last the full 30-minute round. Rogue, or possibly Rogue, mode is where the Slay the Spire element comes into play. When starting up, players are presented with a roadmap that leads to the boss, and they can choose which stages they challenge on their way there. Stages range from having to kill a certain number of enemies, to having to survive for a specific amount of time, and often even combine the two. Each time the player completes a level, they're rewarded with a new skill card to choose from. Skill cards take the form of different weapons, magical skills, or various passive abilities, and are all given their own rarity values. After completing a run, players unlock the next difficulty level. They start with only F tier unlocked, but after beating an F tier run, they unlock E tier, and so on. Of all the games on this list, Roguegenesia arguably has the best, or at least most striking, graphics. As one Steam reviewer put it, this is Vampire Survivors with RTX enabled. The pixel art combined with the beautiful 2D HD lighting and shadows makes for a wonderful game visually. Roguegenesia is still in early access on Steam at the time of writing, but the unlockable difficulty levels, various build options, and in-game challenges already provide a lot of replayability. Spellbook Demon Slayers. The title of this next game sums it up very well. You slay demons using a spellbook. Each playable character starts with their own spell, and they can unlock up to 4 additional spells by leveling up, like collecting weapons in Vampire Survivors. Another similarity is that spells, and even passive abilities, can also be evolved in Spellbook Demon Slayers, although there is far more opportunity for replacing weapons if they're not quite doing the job. There are a couple of fairly simple stages available to play in the game, although at the time of writing there are more to be added in future updates. Each stage has different time requirements. For example, the first stage only needs to be survived for 13 minutes in order to clear it, while the second and third stages both have 20-minute requirements. If the player is able to survive for the specified length of time, then they're given the option of ending their run there, or playing on in order to get a high score. Players once again level up by collecting different colored experience gems, and when leveling, are given the choice of an active spell skill or a passive buff skill. Once spells reach level 5 and passive skills reach level 4, they can be evolved to their next stage, making them far more powerful. A unique aspect of Spellbook Demon Slayers that no other game does is the inclusion of the totem mechanic. Periodically, totems will spawn on the map. The player then needs to kill a certain number of enemies while standing in the totem's range, and after killing the last required enemy, are rewarded with a temporary buff. The totem mechanic adds an extra dynamic layer to the gameplay compared to other games on this list. Once again, at the time of writing, Spellbook Demon Slayers is still in early access on Steam. However, the developers only intend to be in early access for 3 to 6 months, so this game may very well be the next one on this list to fully release. The game currently has 100 achievements, so there's already a lot of replayability on offer. Brotato. If Roguegenesia was Vampire Survivors meets Slay the Spire, then Brotato is Vampire Survivors meets Binding of Isaac. It's an arena shooter roguelite like most of the other games on this list, but every item the player picks up or buys gets equipped on their character just like in Binding of Isaac. It's always funny to see your character transform from a regular old potato to whatever is going on here. In Brotato, players choose one of many unlockable characters, pick their starting weapon that best suits their chosen class, and have to survive 20 waves of enemies in a fairly small arena. Each wave gets longer and adds more enemies until the final wave, when the player must defeat a boss in order to complete their run. At the end of each wave, players get a choice of 4 upgrade cards to improve their stats, and also get the opportunity to spend their currency at a shop to unlock more weapons or items that grant passive bonuses. The player can equip up to 6 weapons at a time, but they can recycle unwanted weapons between rounds if they want a different one. They're also able to combine duplicate weapons to make one stronger weapon. For example, if they have 2 level 2 weapons, they can combine those 2 to create the same weapon but 1 level higher. Brotato is one of the more simplistic games on this list, but the wave-based progression and opportunity for downtime between rounds is very satisfying. At the time of writing, this game is still in early access on Steam, but the sheer number of characters to unlock already provides a great deal of replayability. And there you have it, 7 of the best games I've found that are sure to scratch that Vampire Survivors itch. Are there any games I've missed? What the heck do you call this genre? Feel free to let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please like it and consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you very much for watching.